Hey, it's the Over the Loudspeaker YouTube show. We're coming to you 2 days after the Super Bowl, maybe 3 days actually, maybe a week, depending on when you're watching this. But we recorded right after the Super Bowl, and it's a fun little episode. It's just me and Colin, no interviews this time, no guests, and we're going over the headlines. We spent the majority of the episode talking about the cuts to HUSD, the cuts to Hayward schools. So if you're interested in that, you can tune in and learn a little bit about what's going on in the school district. And then we have a little surprise for you right at the top of the show. So there's a new intro, and I worked on it really hard, which means I worked on it for like a couple hours after work. But I think it's pretty cool. And if you hear squeaking in the background, that's my dog. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. I think that's it for the intro. Let's get into it.
But I gotta get you a green screen.
I know. Do you have a green screen?
No.
How is
No,
yours so perfect?
Because my camera's good. I don't know.
Yeah, well, my camera is obviously crap. Which, by the way, Colin, happy Super Bowl Sunday for those of you that are watching. We're recording this. I think is the Super Bowl even over yet? I think it is over, right? I mean, it's been over since the beginning.
Oof. That's all right. Kansas City hasn't changed their mascot, so they deserve it.
That's right. And you can always root for Eagles, even though as a Niner fan, it kind of hurts. But either way, it's fair. So we got some feedback already, Colin, about the over the loudspeaker design, and I think I don't know if it was worded exactly like this, but the way I'm interpreting it is that it looks like I'm floating in poop. And that was one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten so far of our lovely YouTube show that we have here. Dang. So, if folks are interested in giving us more feedback, more, feedback that will, rather than break down my ego, build it up a little bit more.
That's constructive criticism.
Some constructive criticism. No, we got some good constructive criticism. Those who gave it will know. Hopefully, we'll be able to tell that you took it and putting it into practice.
Ooh.
So, but I think that we're on episode, believe it or not, episode 3.
What?
And it feels like we just started this thing, and here we are rolling the episodes out on a monthly schedule, like we promised. And we'll see how long we can keep it going. So far, it's been pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I'm hoping to keep it rolling. I mean, one a month is manageable. If we're very fortunate, we'll be able to scale up at some point.
We'll see. If that sponsor comes through, we can start dreaming up of who the sponsors are. They will be canceled immediately also for taking on some corporate, we're brought to you by Amazon. No, I'm just kidding. That would be bad. I'm not taking shots at anyone, I promise. All right, Colin, let's get into the headlines before I get us in trouble here.
Let's get right into the headlines. The headlines from this last month. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the Amtrak realignment. So the City Council heard a presentation in January from the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority on the plan to change the Amtrak alignment through Hayward. The plan would shift Amtrak west into the industrial area, formerly Russell City, and eliminate the Hayward Amtrak station by Cannery Park and Burbank Elementary. The change would improve travel times between San Jose and Oakland by 13 minutes, which the CCJPA spokesperson described as a lot of time, his emphasis. And it would also include multiple improvements to that section of the route to address climate change and other things. But the city council was unanimously against the change, at times getting pretty confrontational with the speaker. For example, Councilmember Zermanio said, quote, "I hope that you receive no funding whatsoever. I hope it fails," end quote. Next in line is examining the sanctuary status of the city of Hayward. Earlier this month, in January, the city of Hayward reaffirmed its sanctuary status in light of rumored ICE raids happening in the city. I think this was just before or around the inauguration time. And while the city framed the sanctuary designation as a protection for residents, the reality of the laws are much more complicated. In the longer story, we examined the policies at HUSD, which does not allow ICE or any other agencies on school sites and will not share records with them, as well as HPD. Among other details, it's important to remember that if anyone is ever arrested for any reason, even if they did nothing wrong, HPD can learn their immigration status and share it with ICE per policy 415.8. So even if you are suspected of a crime and held in HPD custody, Hayward sanctuary status means nothing, even if you actually did nothing wrong. The next big story was the HUSD budget. This is one that I think is on a lot of people's minds. The Hayward Unified School District is facing a huge budget deficit of $54 million, $12 million of which needs to be addressed this year. The deficit is the result of ending state and federal COVID aid money and declining enrollment, which directly affects state funding. Superintendent Ryman reassured the public that cuts would minimize the impact on students as much as possible, but most of HUSD's Board of Trustees was silent on the matter, with only new trustee Austin Bruckner Carrillo raising concerns about transparency. I'm just concerned, he said, that February 12th is going to come and it's going to be a budget that's not reflective of the priorities of the board, end quote. The plan's still being finalized, but currently cuts include around 150 HUSD staff, and the proposed cuts for this year will be presented at the next board meeting on February 12th, and then have to be approved by the end of February. If you'd like to learn more about these headlines, please subscribe to the Hayward Herald at haywardherald.substack.com. The Hayward Herald is your only source of independent Hayward news delivered to your inbox at least twice a week. Please subscribe and share our stories with your friends and family. Oh, I got the banner. So good.
Collin, I have to say, each week you're getting, or each month, each time we record this, you're getting better and better at doing that plug for the Hayward Herald, for the podcast, for the YouTube show. I mean, I don't know whether to call it a podcast, a YouTube show. I kind of just want it to be a YouTube show and not a podcast, but I guess they're one and the same.
I mean, why limit ourselves in this day and age? We can be everywhere. But practice makes perfect.
We want, right?
We can.
Practice makes perfect. Exactly. All right, Collin. I love the piece about Zermenio. That quote is fantastic. I mean, he just continues to build on his legacy in this city. What incredible! I have no words. But I would like to talk a little bit about the sanctuary policy, because I think they're obviously for a lot of reasons, right? There's concern about whether or not or what jurisdiction ICE has, especially after Trump has lifted the sort of what was the term that was used? Sensitive spaces or sensitive, I forget if it was sensitive spaces or sensitive areas that technically ICE was not supposed to go into. This includes schools, this includes churches, this includes those seem to be the two biggest ones that come up. I think I'm leaving out a third space of some sort. And so there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, rightfully so, right? Paranoia that ICE agents will enter schools. And there's been a lot of reporting of ICE, and some of it accurate, some of it not, right? So people out of sort of extreme caution doing so. But, I think I wanted to talk a little bit about just the sanctuary piece, because there's nothing stopping ICE agents from going into schools if they have, for example, a warrant. And if that's all they need is a warrant. And so, luckily enough, there was just in the last week or so, I would say, AG Rob Bonta has put together this, I don't know how useful a 55-page document is, but he's put together a 55-page document for schools that sort of is a school-based guidance in case ICE agents show up on their school grounds or campus. And the reminder is that, of course, that ICE agents need a judicial warrant to arrest and detain people. We've seen already clips sort of going viral of people sort of standing up to ICE in
Yeah.
various neighborhoods across the country. I think that I saw one earlier today. I don't know how accurate, again, this was, but somewhere in Colorado where ICE agents were sort of going door to door, and there's like a video of a guy sort of saying, you got to get out of here. But in any case, right, we know that ICE can enter as long as they have a warrant. What the likelihood that this is going to happen is unclear to me. I think even if you ask the experts, they're as if you remember in 2016, it was a lot of like, we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know what this administration is going to do. But at the very least, it seems like there'll be some pushback from officials, whether it be local officials or state officials, if this is the route that ICE wants to take.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm glad. It sucks that the sensitive spaces or whatever that part is gone, because I know that's been a big thing. The one thing that I know, at least because I work in education, and I know that's something we just recently had a presentation about from our president, was that strictly speaking, classrooms, not the rest of the school campus, but classrooms themselves are considered private spaces. They are basically the same as someone's office, and ICE is not allowed to go into there without a warrant. So they might be able through that to troll the grounds, even though there's going to be conflict, obviously, with the policy from the school and anything else that goes on. If there's a warrant, all bets are off. But I know getting a warrant's hard to find, and from a lot of the clips I've seen, ICE does a lot of trolling and seeing what they can get. So hopefully, their difficulty or laziness around getting a warrant is going to work against them for places that are well prepared.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the things that folks who are doing the kind of know your rights training and training for observation to happen of detainment, they're one point that they're making very clear is like the ICE agent needs to have a warrant that's signed by a judge, and they can show whatever, but as long as there's no warrant and it has a judge's signature on it, then it doesn't mean anything, right? And then the other sensitive space is hospitals. So it's schools, churches. I think courthouses also probably counts as one, and then hospitals, schools, hospitals, churches, courthouse. Yeah. So, we'll share this 55 for those of you who are educators, or if you maybe are saying like, what are we going to do to protect our students? We haven't heard anything from our district. We haven't heard from I haven't heard anything from our school. I'll share this document that the AG put out, the California Attorney General. He just put it out in December. It's going to be maybe in the link in the of this show. So you can check it out and look it over. And, I think is a nice segue into what's happening at HUSD with the budget. And it seems like Hayward is not the only school that's facing this budget shortfall. Also, Oakland Unified School District, if I'm not mistaken, West Contra Costa Unified School District, maybe San Francisco Unified School District. So the Hayward is not alone in this struggle, and maybe it points to a much bigger issue.
Yeah, I think the school staff has been really good about pointing out that literally all 18 school districts in Alameda County are dipping into reserves this year. Like, no one is doing well on their budget right now. The difference is Hayward's just kind of ahead of the curve, unfortunately, but even then we're among 4 others. And because we're not like quibbling about whether or not we have a bad budget, which is something some other districts are doing, we're getting ahead of it faster than some of the other districts. So, but yeah, we're in really good company, and the issue is as you said, very systemic. It's an issue of declining enrollment, because unfortunately, as the superintendent pointed out during an online meeting that I attended, that California is one of the few states in the country that ties funding directly to enrollment.
Or
a lot of other places, right? And attendance too. Mm-hmm. So most other states don't do that, and even within that, if there are fewer students, the same amount of money is supposed to get allocated, so you should get more money per student, so it should all sort of balance out. But according to the superintendent, the state legislature gets a little fast and loose with some of the how they interpret that, and so they take some of the money that should be going directly to schools and do it as grants or some earmark it for other things, and they play a little funny with the budget, and that's to the detriment of our students. So there's not a lot that can be done, unfortunately. Like the schools are obviously advocating and paying lobbyists sometimes when they can and doing all that stuff. But again, as someone who's been in education, the legislature doesn't care. They just don't. They don't listen to educators. They listen to the education lobby, which oftentimes works for private for-profit schools and some other nefarious characters, and not to the actual educators themselves.
Right. And, and then there's the other aspect of it, that always gets talked about when we talk about funding schools and equity in schools is Prop 13, right? It's 1978 that froze property taxes at their 1976 value, if I'm not mistaken, or limit them to the rate of 1%, something along those lines. And so I part of it is, when I was reading your piece, thinking about, okay, what is it a combination of all these factors? Is it truly the sort of attendance and enrollment? Clearly, there hasn't been as much, or students haven't returned since the pandemic at the same rate. And then we also don't want to take the stance of our girl Kamala Harris, who was going after parents for truancy, right? So what is the answer here? And on top of that, right, California has a budget surplus if I'm not mistaken, like a lot more money than they were counting on. So do we foresee the state here sort of sending money to schools? Is it on the legislature to make that decision? And what do schools do in the meantime? Is it they make the cuts and hope for the best that the budget will look better in the next year or so?
Yeah, I mean, the according to the superintendent, they do have a slightly increased cost of living adjustment, about 0.5% more than what they expected, which in the grand scheme of things can be a lot for a big budget. But again, a lot of it's systemic. They spent a lot of the ARPA money to try and get students back because after technically the pandemic, the lockdown stuff ended, their truancy rate was at like 50+%. Like it was huge. Like only half the students were coming back. So they spent a lot of time and effort getting into that, but also because of the big lag in learning, they had to hire a lot of people to do like special education to catch up students who are having learning difficulties after having been home for so long. And there's a lot of stuff. And as the superintendent pointed out too, that from an attraction of especially like higher income students, because obviously, or higher income parents and families, that those private and charter schools look great. But as he said, that's because they can turn people away. They are able to say, you're doing poorly in your classes, we're just going to kick you out. We can't bring on someone who has that severe special needs, whereas the Hayward Unified has to take everybody, no matter what. That's their job. They're a public institution, so they're not able to be choosy the way charter and private schools are able to be, and that does wind up, unfortunately, reflecting on their some of their completion scores and everything. But it's not comparing in a fair manner, looking at things like that too. So it's hard.
And I'm guessing we don't have a real sense of what's going to be cut quite yet, right? And then what role do the various unions play in determining what happens, right? I know that, for example, in West Contra Costa, there's already teachers, social workers, speech therapists, other administrative staff that were on the chopping block and already have been cut. So what will be the impact of those cuts on the Hayward Unified School District? I always make the assumption that always it's going to impact those students who need those services the most. But is there a way to do cuts strategically, at a school,
I mean, they're trying. They're doing a lot better than they did before, right? Because if you recall, back in the 2020s, there was a a previous superintendent who tried to balance the budget by just shuttering a bunch of schools
He
unilaterally,
who will not be named in
and who
the
then coincidentally went to San Francisco and tried to do the same thing and got
Right.
drummed out of there pretty hard too. So they've been trying to do some outreach, but I think one thing that's difficult and important to bear in mind is that like the current superintendent's only been there for like a year and a half. Like
Right.
he came into a bad situation and is trying to make the best of it as an administrator. But I think that he's trying to do it. But he said even like if we were to try and just cut personnel to meet the $54 million deficit, they'd have to cut like 500 people. And that's just that's impossible. You can't do that and have a district that works.
Mm-hmm.
From what it sounds like, they're going to try and be strategic, but they focused on this first round of cuts because it's going to be several rounds of it on district office staff to try and keep it as far away from teachers as possible. But it's going to spill over. Like it just is. There's just too much to cut. So it's hard. And, you know, they wanted to point out too that like for the for people to say, oh, well, you used one-time money to buy ongoing services. It's like, well, we needed those ongoing services to get people back into the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like they spent the money the way we're supposed to. It's just the money's gone now. So we have to, some of those things are going to have to go, but priorities have changed. And some of those things, extras we bought on are really, really important to families. Like a lot of families have been speaking out in favor of the family engagement specialists, which some of whom are funded with those pandemic dollars. And those might wind up sticking around because parents want them so much, but that means you got to cut from somewhere else. So it's all just like trying to make the best of a bad situation, because unless the funding situation drastically improves, which I'm not betting on, unfortunately.
Right. And yeah, I'm thinking back at your, at the 50% truancy rate that figure that you had dropped. And I'm just, that takes a support system that goes beyond schools, right? That goes beyond, talking about social services and other resources for families and addressing their basic needs, right? Before, in order to get those folks back into the classroom. So it's a challenge that the school system won't be able to solve itself, but is going to need we're going to need more resources maybe at the city level, but also some broader reforms at the state level as well to kind of, because it would be, if it's one school, you say, okay, Oakland, they go through this every year. They're always being threatened of taking over. Now that you have multiple schools across the Bay Area, across the district, across the county, you say, okay, this issue is systemic. How do we? There has to be some action happening at the state level now.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. We'll see if they do anything.
We'll see if they do anything, and I'm curious to see what labor's response is going to be if once they see where the sort of cuts are headed, because there's bound to be some pushback, and it gets tricky, right, when you start talking about laying off teachers or cutting teachers, and so not a great situation for the kids who are going to ultimately be impacted, but also the workers in those schools, right, who depend on that for their livelihood. So not a good scenario. Gavin Newsom, send some money down. There's a surplus, goddammit.
Come on. Stop funding the state corrections and start funding some schools, man.
There you go. We solved it, Collin. We did it.
The end.
Phone
it in. Episode over.
It's done. What a great episode we have. And under 30 minutes. This is incredible. Well, Collin, before we take off, I think at the beginning of this episode, we might see a new intro. So this will make sense for those of you who already watched it. You probably already watched the intro. So there's going to be a new intro to the show. And I hope you enjoy it. We're going to be posting a lot of stuff on social media, or trying to post a lot of stuff on social media. We'll see how that goes. We're a two-man team here. Sometimes we're a three-person team, but most often it's a two-person squad. So with that said, if you're interested in supporting what we do here, the best thing you could do is subscribe for now.
Obviously.
And I will throw the ticker on in case you haven't seen it yet. It's really great. That's the best thing you could do. But also, put a little comment in the comment box. Give it a little like. Give it a little
Yeah.
send it out to your friends. And if you hate it, that's great. That's also I'll take it. I'll take some hate.
Engage.
Engage. Yeah, that's right. If you have any questions though for us or anything you'd like to see us cover, I believe you can send a message directly to Collin and myself on the Hayward Herald Substack, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. You can do that. You can respond to that email and it'll go back to us. You can also email us. You can respond on the social media. We're posting stuff to Facebook. Hopefully people have been seeing that. And yeah, you can also I think email is probably the best way. I don't know. I know you monitor the YouTube channel better than I do, so
Yeah, we'll see it one way or another.
yeah, we'll find it. And
right.
if once you get in contact with us, you can just reach out. It'll be fine.
Just reach out. And okay, now we're going to segue into the Super Bowl. What were your thoughts on? I'm just kidding. Let's get out of here. We'll stop there.